Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. I am Ronaldo McKenzie. Today, we have breaking news commentary, LGBTQ, and the rise in extremism in America and the world. Today, we share a brief excerpt of the live official press conference by the Colorado Springs Law Enforcement and the District Attorney's Office and Mayor's Office concerning the shooting at Nightclub Q, an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs. On November 19th, 2022, a lone gunman entered the nightclub and fired his gun into the nightclub. He entered the club shooting indiscriminately, killing 5 and injuring several, before 2 men, Thomas and Richard, disabled the gunman and beating him to the ground. The suspect is currently recovering from injuries and is to be formally arrested and charged and taken in for questioning. That's according to Mr. Michael Allen, the district attorney in Colorado, who reported and spoke earlier this evening. This shooting speaks to a wider and larger issue in society, the rise in extremism, and not just black-on-black violence stemming from poverty and other social decays. But there have been several incidents of violence in America aimed at certain groups based on a particular political, racial, ethnic, or religious bias, or sexual bias. Moreover, today, Russia is justifying their violence as a world-saving mission because Putin believes that Ukraine seems to be taking on values that are anti-Russian and threatens their dominance and majority in the region. Hence, while we seek justice for the victims of this and any heinous attack on crime in the world and in our society, there are those who feel justified for their actions of violence. The suicide bombers who had attacked or hijacked the planes on 9/11 felt justified and believed that they were serving Allah and that virgins would meet them when they die. The January 6 insurrectionists believed that they were justified and within their rights to attack with violence the U.S. Capitol to usurp or protect their power, which was a demonstration of their privilege. While the 18-year-old white male who used his AK-47 and gunned down 11 African Americans at a supermarket felt justified as he was entranced by white extremists' replacement ideology. This behavior is taking root as people either seek to privilege a biased position or envy another's. This is the end of progress and continues the challenges we face as humanity. Until we learn that the ultimate of all things is that we become one with reality in all of our individuality. I provide commentary on the shooting at the nightclub today with excerpts of the news commentary and then provide an analysis in relation to a wider issue on extremism, Occidentalism, Orientalism, and the problem of power, position, status, and how these strategies or how power and its strategies pose challenges for society and is the result of the dynamics that pertains in society today. I begin to raise these concepts in my new book, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, which will be out late December, early 2023. And this also provides a foundational and anecdotal basis to continue looking and studying power and the dynamics of human society as it pertains today. Of course, part of this is going to form some of the discussion points in my dissertation. As you may very well know, I'm doing my doctoral studies at Georgetown University. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, where some of my first book and my second book have many of the studies and the research are contained in that. And of course, I want to give a shout out to the University of the West Indies and the Jamaica Theological Seminary that helped to formulate some of my original ideas, concepts, and academic training. Of course, please, you can access my book, Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, which is available in all platforms worldwide. And please, visit us at the Neoliberal Corporation, https://www.theneoliberal.com, and support us at anchor.fm/theneoliberal. Please, listen to this powerful episode, and coming up next is an ad, and then our introduction music, and we go right into the podcast, lifting up some important news stories from the commentary or from the press conference they had today in Colorado Springs, and we will share some of the excerpts of that with you, just a brief one, and then of course we'll continue the analysis. This is the Neoliberal Round Podcast.
Criminal law is that we don't have to prove, when we go to a court, we don't have to prove motive, but obviously we're all humans and we want to know what caused somebody to go in and do something as horrific as this. So that's why we just heard from the PIO that's being investigated. It's important that if we have enough evidence to support bias-motivated crimes, to charge that. It's important for this community. It's important for the prosecution effort to show why something happened. And if there's enough evidence to support that in this case, when we get to the formal filing charges, we will absolutely be including those charges here as well. But I want to also be clear that the bias-motivated statute in Colorado, the highest level charge that we can get with that charge is a Class 4 felony. We're obviously talking about 5 people that were killed. Their lives were ended. Those are going to be the top-end charges in this case, without a doubt. Those charges will likely carry life in prison without parole, whereas the Class 4 felonies are probation-eligible offenses. So those do not in any way elevate the potential sentence in a case like this, but it is important to let the community know that we do not tolerate bias-motivated crimes in this community, that we support communities that have been maligned, harassed, and intimidated and abused, and that's one way that we can do that, showing that we will put the money where our mouth is, essentially, and make sure that we try it that way. So I hope that answers your question, but we're going to absolutely be reviewing it for formal charges along those same lines.
That was the El Paso district attorney in El Paso, Michael Allen, talking at a official news conference on the deadly LGBTQ nightclub shooting in Colorado Springs, where about 5 persons were killed. Again, that's breaking news today. There is an official news conference that is underway concerning the deadly LGBTQ nightclub shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs, killing 5 people. Now, whether or not this was a bias or hate-motivated crime, we do not know. What we do know is that the suspect is alive, is recovering from injuries sustained by Thomas, two gentlemen by the name of Thomas and Richard, who the Colorado Springs law enforcement just revealed. Thomas and Richard were 2 individuals who were said to be heroes because they helped to disable this gentleman and were beating him before law enforcement came on the scene and arrested him. But they will actually be investigating motive. But the issue of bias is important, and we're going to be talking about that today. The issue of bias motivated crime. Hate crime is on the rise in this country and all over the world. All over the world. The issue of bias, the issue of privilege, the issue of ethnocentrism, and we actually carried a podcast, and also I submitted several articles in LinkedIn, the Neoliberal Commentary, and the Neoliberal Post, and our blogs talking about this issue of bias, this issue of power, this issue of privilege, studying human dynamics. And if you were to revisit this story in the Christian Bible, the story of Cain and Abel, and see how human beings have always displayed this propensity to tear down each other, privileging or biasing a particular position or envying a particular position, so that they are willing to commit violence. And to be honest, as we talk about seeking justice for the victims, not only those who were killed, who were murdered, but also those who, there are several persons who were, just one gentleman was shot several times, but he's alive today. And there are people who are suffering from the trauma of just having been in that situation and fleeing for their lives, like this lone gunman. We hear about people attacking mosques, Jewish synagogues, Christian churches. We hear about Russia invading and destroying invading Ukraine and creating mayhem and wiping out communities because of a world-saving mission. These people feel justified in their actions. When someone would go into a particular community, a church, a certain church, or a certain group, a gay nightclub, so to speak, LGBTQ, nightclub, and just start to spray bullets all over the place, killing people. They feel justified. But human beings have this, and I say to you, we are about serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. I say if you go to the neoliberal.com and hover over to blogs, you see where I talk about, and you open up our blog, the first thing you see posted at the top is, what is the ultimate of all things? What is the ultimate of all things? The ultimate of all things is that we become one with reality in all of our individuality. And I believe that's the greatest miracle. As much as people talk about God, Jesus coming back for his flock, or other people talk about become one with reality, nirvana, or irrespective of whatever faith or belief one have. But I believe the greatest miracle, the greatest challenge for humanity is the ability to be able to come together and to accept each other, irrespective of who we are, irrespective of tongue or race or language, how we practice what we practice, so long as it does not interfere, so it doesn't affect us. There is this level of ethnocentrism. And, sometimes we talk about Occidentalism and Orientalism, and we actually carried a podcast. I won't repeat myself talking about that, and that's part of my study at Georgetown, looking at power, privilege, position, status, and how these pose problems for human progress. And I say to you, look at the dynamics in the world today. The dynamics in the world today speaks to some of the privileges, that certain people have, is what pertains in society today. And if you go against that grain, you call that, people create taboos, and they call it taboo, which is a negative word, which I am against the word taboo, because it fuels ethnocentrism or Occidentalism or Orientalism. When we talk about Orientalism, is Western views about the East or suspicions about the East, and Occidentalism is the converse, is the Eastern suspicions about the West. But when you delve into Occidentalism and Orientalism, the suspicions are a little bit, there are suspicions, West suspicions of the East and East suspicions of the West, and of course what usually happens, people create caricatures, people create symbols or create ideas, negative ideas about the other, ideas that does not truly reflect the other, so as to overcome, so as to demean, so as to justify an action which does violence or to the other. And I say, for example, I say to you, when people talk about the issue of Marxism or versus socialism and so on, people redefine the term in order to promote their particular system, and even create laws or create some kind of policy that prevents you from trading with any particular country that promotes such ideology. I mean, those kinds of things. So, say, for example, Cuba and the one that America had on Cuba. But this is important. There is always this justification that people have. See, for example, Russia invasion of the Ukraine. It is justified as a world-saving mission. Ukraine should not have any interests outside of the interest of Russia. All of Russia. So it's as if these countries got independence, but the independence that they got was an independence that was supposed to continue to recognize Russia as mother. And they were supposed to continue to hold on to Russia as mother. And they were supposed to continue to be second to Russia. And I say to you, the kind of independence that many West Indian countries have, and some of the countries in Africa who were once colonized by European countries, when they ceremonially got their independence, the independence that they got to was a negotiated independence, where they continue to hold on to certain values. That keeps them down. That keeps them as dependent capitalist countries. Again, violence is being done, and violence can be either. And when you talk about violence, we're talking about violence diplomatically or politically, or violence can be through embargoes and so on and so forth, or there could be violence in terms of what we're seeing today, where a lone gunman walks into a nightclub, killing, and just spraying bullets. And when you look at what happened January 6th and the insurrection, there are many people who felt justified by their violence. And their violence is not even seen as violence anymore. It's seen as a crusade. And when you study extremism and suicide bombers who would go as far as to bomb, as to commit suicide. So, okay. And that people would walk into a plane, hijack the plane, and and killing themselves and hundreds of people. They feel justified because hundreds of virgins are going to meet them when they die. They feel justified. Because of their Occidentalism, their suspicions against the West, and their ideology or theology, which promotes privilege, where they privilege their position over the other. People, and that is the death of society. And when I said I'm studying, and that is what I'm looking at as I look at privilege, power, and position, and as we get into neoliberal globalization reconsidered, where I say to you, certain peoples in the world will be left behind, are supposed to be in the background. And then we have policies and the ways in which society is set up that perpetuates this. And people are oblivious to strategy. Or there might be some people some elites in some of these countries and some of these places that benefit. But what has happened today, as I say to you, speak to the issue of people's inability to accept somebody else's position and an inability to respect the other because of this ethnocentrism, because of this exceptionalism that certain people that we promote. And it is absolutely tragic what has happened today and what's going on in society. It was just recently that a young 18-year-old young man killed about 11 people because he was practicing what they call it extremist ideology, replacement theory, trying to limit or to control the number of black people. Or we're talking about replacement ideology because of the suspicions that people have that by 2025 or so the majority will form the minority, or the minority form the majority, and so on, until people feel justified. So he felt justified. This is how during the Black Lives Matter movement, when people were protesting police brutality, and that young kid that went into the crowd with his gun and sprayed, he felt justified, and he was lauded as a hero. He felt justified in launching an attack on the Black Lives Matter movement. And that is and I'm telling you that as a society, as a world, that inability to come together, I think that's the greatest miracle. We talk about, you read all these religious books, they talk about love. But then you find certain religions and denominations talk about love, but then the exceptional love is done within the confines of the faith. And any other that depart from the faith, the love does not extend. They would love you into the faith, but if you refuse from that faith, then they are willing to do violence through political means, through wars or suicide bombing, so on and so forth. But what is the ultimate of all things? The ultimate of all things is that we become one with reality. But I tell you today, people feel justified for actions of violence, for they feel that their violence is vilified by their privileged position. Their actions are vilified by their privileged position. And so several persons today and individuals are grieving, suffering from the trauma of a violent attack by a gunman who attacked a LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs. And of course, the issue of bias came up, and they are not going to. And we are hearing from at the press conference today that they will not rule out. They will not rule out not only the fact that that 5 persons were murdered or were killed by this gunman, but of course they will explore the issue of bias, crime, or hate, the hate crime, and the motive. But I'm understanding that these only carry some minor charges. I am hearing that if someone commits a crime, a hate crime, these only carry minor offenses. The hate crime must lead to death. Someone has to really die from the hate crime in order for the charges or the penalty to be harsh. Absolutely ridiculous. That is something that we need to revisit. But this is the Neoliberal Round podcast, and I say to you, and we will continue to look at this if you look at the foundations of time, people have always, and it's just this tendency to privilege themselves. But if you read the scriptures and you read the scriptures and you read all of other biblical writings and you study the history of time, you study that they talk about the fall of humanity. And of course, some Greek scholars would believe that, and the way how they write would point to women, and how the woman seduced the man. But may I tell you that it's beyond that. It's this envy, it's this hate that has caused the fall. It is that inability to accept the other. That is the death and the fall of humanity. And so that is what we are to. And that, if anything, the ultimate want is for us as people to come together. And that is what we're about at the Neoliberal, serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. The only way the challenges can be solved is when we are able to rise above our ethnocentrism, Orientalisms or Occidentalisms, our Pharisicalism and hypocrisy or duplicity, to accept each other and to live as one. Because what is the ultimate of all things? And and as much as we talk about Jesus who died on the cross, he sacrificed himself. He gave up his divinity and became human, became flesh, take on all that. I believe people don't really delve into this thing, this story of this Jesus who gave up his divinity and would die on a cross, taking on other. He would say that. I believe that is a demonstration of what it means for human beings. Salvation for humanity requires that each of us as human beings, as individuals, to go beyond ourselves, to walk outside of ourselves. If it means to give up our privilege, if it means to give up our power, if it means to sacrifice self, if it means to turn our back from some comforts in order to save the next person, in order to come together as people, then we have to do that. We have to go outside of the comfort zone. We have to give up. We have to sacrifice. We have to go beyond. But guess what? People are not willing to give up their privilege. We were some time ago out. Was it Macmillan or something? That used to be on Stephen A. Smith's show. Talk about he loves his privilege. I take my privilege so that I can. But Jesus didn't do that. He didn't accept his privilege. He gave up his deity and his divinity. He forsook his privilege and his biases in order that he can save, in order that he can uplift. That's a powerful story as we go into Thanksgiving. As we think about Thanksgiving, I reflect on this idea of the ultimate, that which goes beyond self, that which to consider the other. But people bias their positions. They bias their culture as better than the other. People have this. Yeah, we people can compete, but that doesn't mean we can't come together as one. We can't live together as one. That is the death of humanity, and I think that is the lessons. If we are going somewhere as a universe, or as a world, or as human beings, our journey is taking us somewhere where where we are able to come together and live as one, because that is when we are. The Bible talks about a picture of the Tower of Babel, and how people were working together, and that allegory, talking about that imagery. They were building this tower, and it was going, and it was reaching all the way up to the sky. And we talk about God had to confuse them by giving them different languages because they were coming up too close. But that story was powerful because it speaks to the power of human beings when they are able to come together and go beyond. Okay, when we are able to speak with one voice and one tongue. Yes? When we're able to... that is a powerful image. But no, today people are not willing to do that. People bias their positions and they bias themselves. And they say, I don't care. I don't give a... That's a new word now, That's what I don't give a... I don't care. I don't give a... That's the new thing now. A world where we are driven only by self and by greed and nepotism, which is part of this neoliberal strategy as well. Neoliberalism feed into this idea that we talk about here. I say to you, I'm writing this book, and which is I've completed the manuscript for book 2 of Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, and of course I lift up some of these very important points, and also, which is also a precursor and leads into the third and final book, which is part of our dissertation, which is looking at power, privilege, and status, looking at how power and the strategies poses problems for society today. And when we look at the dynamics of society today, we look at what has pertained in the world throughout, which explain the dynamics that we have in society, which is instructive for us as a world if we are to serve the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. Because not only as academics we're not studying just a phenomenon, but this particular study helps us to understand and come to a conclusion about things that will help us to better society. This is the Neoliberal Podcast.